Hello and welcome to Choose a Fi. Today on the show, we have our monthly roundup, and I have my good friend Ginger back here joining me, and this should be a lot of fun. We each went back and listened in great detail to episodes 453, 454, and 455. We're going to really dive into our major takeaways so we can all consolidate what we've learned. And ultimately, the point is to take action. So this should be a lot of fun. And with that, welcome to Choose a Fi. All right, Ginger, welcome back. I missed you last month.
Oh, yeah, I missed being here. So thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, this should be fun. So you took your big trip using some travel rewards points, right?
Yeah, we got it mostly paid for with points and stayed in a nicer hotel for one of the portions of it than I ever would have because of points. And so that was one thing that was really fun. But overall, it was a really good trip.
Nice. That is awesome. And this was the big Europe trip, right?
Yes, it was the big Europe trip. Mostly we were in the Netherlands, and I did the thing that I think people often do on vacation where they're like, wait, maybe we should live here. Let's look up how to live here. But now I'm back and it's fine. It's fine to be back here. But yeah, we really enjoyed it, and I can definitely see the appeal.
That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely know there are people in the FI community who are making moves to Europe. I've seen a couple people move to Portugal. And my friend Andy just moved to Barcelona, Spain. So that's quite cool. Yeah, I think there is some allure of that. And certainly, and we've talked about this before, is walkable cities. I think that to me is something that like I just crave so significantly. And actually, after chatting about it with Chad Carson a couple months ago, he actually just sent me a couple books on walkable cities. So I know that's something he's really, really passionate about. So that's something we'll double back to in a future episode. But I'm just getting into it right now.
Yeah, quality of life. Okay, well, Brad, before we jump into talking about the episodes this month, I wanted to ask you a question that I want you to put your CPA hat on. I hardly know how to ask the question because I feel like maybe it's obvious and other people know this, but probably if I have the question, other people do as well.
Well, Ginger, first off, if you have the question, undoubtedly people have the question. I think that's what's so beautiful about Choose a Fi is we're not afraid to ask what might be silly questions or what you might think are silly questions, because that's the tactic I've always taken. It's like, if I'm curious about it, I suspect there are many, many, many tens of thousands of people out there who just want to know the same thing, but we're just afraid to ask. So lay it on me. Hopefully I can answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's how I feel. I feel like this is my value. I'm a normal person who doesn't know the answer to these questions. So I will bring them to the person who knows. Okay, so I have an after-tax brokerage account that for me is set aside as my early retirement fund, right? Like this is the stuff that I'm not putting in my 401k. This is just my after-tax account. With me?
Yep.
Okay. And I put some money into it every month and have done that for a couple years. So the situation isn't that I had a giant chunk of money and I put it in 3 years ago and I haven't put anything in since then, right? I just, like many people, I put in a little bit every month. So I started thinking, okay, what if I take out some of that money today? Let's say I take out $5,000. Well, I've definitely had $5,000 in this account for more than a year. So I'm assuming then that it would count when it comes to tax time as the long-term gains, right? Taxed that way instead of the short-term. But my question is, how does Vanguard know to pull the funds that I did more than a year ago? Or how does the federal government know that? Or how, like, am I supposed to do anything to make sure that it's the money that I put in a long time ago?
Okay. Yep. That is a brilliant question. And I think that's something that I suspect just about everybody has that exact question. So, okay, the reason why you want it to be longer than a year is for the preferential long term capital gains tax. So that's really smart. Whereas if you sell something that you have purchased less than a year ago and there's a gain on it, that gain is taxed at ordinary income tax rates, right? So it would be at your top marginal bracket, assuming all things equal. But then if it was sold more than a year after purchase, then it would be those preferential rates, which for most people are 15%. They're actually an interesting way, depending if how low your income is, could be 0%, which is actually really awesome. And then there's some higher rates for high income taxpayers. So let's think 15%. That's, I think, the way to look at it. So yeah, Vanguard makes this really, really easy. So yeah, you have a after tax, your just taxable brokerage account is what we call it. So this
Okay.
is
Yeah.
just your normal savings, right? Instead of
Right.
having it under your mattress or at your bank, you have it in Vanguard. And whatever you have it invested in, I mean, frankly, the Vanguard brokerage account is just a shell. So it goes in there as cash. And then you would have purchased, let's say, VTI or VTSAX or some other fund, whatever it may be. And like you said, you've been purchasing it in small, regular increments over a couple of years. So unquestionably, there are some of those items that are more than a year old. So Vanguard makes it easy in that there are a couple different options in terms of selling mutual funds. But what you really want is the specific ID. So that's actually one of the options. And I believe, and this was certainly a couple years ago, so maybe they've updated it where you don't have to opt into this anymore, but you used to have to actually check off in advance, and it could just be like a day in advance, basically. And this is taxing my memory, so there might be a couple little things at the margin that I'm getting wrong, but this is directionally accurate. So you have to basically say, I want to choose specific ID, which means that I can go in and choose exact mutual funds bought on exact dates for my
Oh.
sale. So it's like Ginger, it's exactly what you're looking for in that sense. And the cool thing is they're called lots. So each lot that you purchased on that day is listed on its own line, and it'll tell you what actually the gain or loss is, the current gain or loss on that specific lot. And I think another important thing to remember is that when you sell, let's say you sell $5,000, I think that was the number you had said. So if you sold $5,000, now that's proceeds. Okay. So that's the amount of current value that you sold. And that's called proceeds. It does not mean that that full $5,000 is taxable. Okay. That's the critical part, because what they do is they look back to what's known as the basis, which is the amount you purchased it for, right? So let's say you bought 50 shares for $98 back in the day. Okay. So that would have been, let's say, $4,900 that you bought at that time. Now, like you said, you've been putting in smaller amounts, so I don't imagine it's that high. But let's say that has risen to $100 per share. So you'd have $100 per share times the 50 shares. So it gets you to your magic 5,000, which is what you want to sell and get those proceeds back into your bank account. So when you sold those shares, those 50 shares of whatever this mutual fund is, you wouldn't be paying even long-term capital gains on the 5,000. It wouldn't be $750 in tax, okay? Because that would be 15% of the 5,000. It would actually just be on a gain of $100 because your basis was 4,900. You sold it for 5,000. So you have $100 long-term capital gain, and that then is applied at the 15% preferential rate. So it would literally be $15 of tax. So it would be essentially negligible. There might be some of those lots in there, Ginger, that you have at a current loss, even. So
Mhm.
you can very specifically identify, hey, I want to sell this, I want to sell that, X number of shares, and just kind of Vanguard tells you specifically what your total gain or loss is. So I know that was a lot, but does that make sense?
No, that was pretty clear. I didn't realize that you could go back and select the specific lot. I'm wondering if that is like an advanced thing that will be hard to find, or is that pretty typical? Not just because some people aren't doing Vanguard.
Yeah, great question. So, right, this would not be limited to Vanguard. We're only talking about Vanguard because you did say Vanguard. But yeah, it's a great question. Every brokerage firm, to my knowledge, has specific ID as an option. So, it definitely would not be limited to Vanguard. But I would just suggest whatever your brokerage is, go and just do a Google search, how to sell a mutual fund specific ID or something like that. And there should be pretty clear instructions. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully that was actually a fairly surprisingly comprehensive view at long-term cap gains, at understanding basis, and yeah, there's a lot there. So I mean, that was a brilliant question.
No, that was really helpful because what you did was you took something that felt really stressful and secretive to me. And now I feel like, okay, I can absolutely figure this out. This is fine.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. So yeah, but just again, remember your tax on this is going to be very, very minimal in all likelihood,
Right.
just because, especially if you bought it not all that long ago, the likelihood there's going to be a massive built-in gain on this unrealized gain is pretty unlikely. And then we're talking $5,000 of proceeds, so you should be good. But yeah, definitely go in there and test it out, and we'll maybe report back next month.
Okay, should we move on to talking about the first episode this month?
Yeah, let's do it. So the first one that we published here in September was episode 453, which was titled From Food Stamps to Fi. And it was with community member Teresa. Ginger, I thought this was really a very impressive episode, just an amazing story to
Hmm.
see what she's overcome, where she's been, and really the fact that her and her husband are really at Fi at this point. It's just such a testament to just keep pushing forward, keep taking action, right?
Yeah. I really loved this episode and we would encourage people to listen to it. I feel like a lot of times in this space, and not just this show, but just in the FI space, there's often attention to the post FI struggle. Oh, I have so many millions of dollars, but it's hard for me to buy a beer. Right? And those are very entertaining and interesting, but they're not inspiring, right? They don't move me to take action. And so even though I like listening to those, it's the stories like Teresa that get me fired up and make me feel like this is available to anyone. And, here's someone who could connect to what my struggles have been. And so, I mean, for that reason too, I know we didn't have a chance to talk about it, but I loved the Becky and Bill
Mm.
episode that you did last month. It was sort of the same thing where it's like, okay, here are some people who are really different from what you usually hear in this space. And so I found them to be really inspiring.
Yeah, that's great. And I have tried so hard over the years to make it so that there's not just one type of person that we
Yeah.
hear, but yet there just is that caricature. It's funny. It just is like the caricature that will not die. It's no
Well,
matter what.
and it's because it's extreme, so it sticks out. So I
Yeah.
more easily bring those to mind, even though it might be that you don't really hear that story as often.
Yeah, agreed. And I loved how Teresa talked about Dave Ramsey's baby steps,
Hmm.
and she said it gave her her first real plan for her finances. And her quote was, "Those baby steps gave me a framework and something to build off of to establish some type of structure in my financial life." And I think that is critical, right? Because most people have no structure. Most people don't know anything about personal finance, and that's why I have gone out of my way repeatedly to say just what a marvelous job Dave Ramsey has done for the world. I mean, obviously there are lots of things that we disagree with him and his organization on, but at their essence, what they're doing is remarkable. It's taking people who are in really desperate, dire need and giving them that rudimentary information and giving them these very specific, precise steps and almost like dogmatic type of view on, hey, you can do this, you can't do that. So there's no moderation here when it comes to Dave Ramsey. It's okay, rip up all your credit cards, don't ever think about it, do X, Y, and Z. And while I think the world operates in shades of gray instead of in black and white, I fully admit and appreciate that for people who are in really dire straits, that black and white, I think that's probably the best way to start, frankly. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think you're getting at the important thing there is about having a plan, about
Mm,
knowing what is my next step. And so we can apply that even if we're not doing that same plan. We can say, okay, well, it's really helpful for people to have a structure, and that structure isn't going to be external. So I have to think about what that's going to look like for me. And I was thinking about this yesterday when a new friend asked me, he said, how much should I save for retirement? And I said, I don't know. And I saw his face drop, right? And it's like,
yeah.
there's something funny about it because, of course, I don't know. Of course, I don't know what that number is for you. But I could see in the drop of his face how much we just want to know something so that we can know what am I supposed to do today. And so I think recognizing, all right, we have to make that structure for ourselves. We have to make that plan and see what that end game is so that we can know, okay, when my next paycheck comes in, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do this because it's going to help me to get to this next step.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, right, I wonder if there's some bridge for Phi in terms of, okay, there might not be one specified plan, but maybe, and this goes back to something that we both think is really important, is automating your finances.
Hmm.
Maybe that's the plan at the beginning. Okay, you set up a plan and then you enact it and then you kind of tweak it little by little as you get more comfortable. As your savings rate increases, you can start sending more money like you do to the Vanguard taxable brokerage account or wherever it may be. Yeah, I wonder because on some levels, I do feel like we let people down in the sense that there is nothing prescribed. Because I think it's so important to say, like, this journey is really personal and you can buy based on what you value, all of these things that are the hallmarks of Choose FI and the financial independence community now. But yet, are we basically hanging people out to dry by not giving them some type of plan? So I don't know. Maybe that's it.
But I would say what you have encouraged people to do is to take action. And even though you're saying, "Oh no, we didn't say what the action is." I think the important part is the getting started part. And so I feel like what we're saying or what Choose FI is saying is lift up your foot. And, I don't know where you should plant it, but you're going to be in a better position if you start moving to get some momentum. And it makes me think of this conversation I had yesterday where I told this guy, like, open your Vanguard account. You don't have to
Hmm.
put anything in it. You don't have to decide the perfect amount today. We can always tweak that later. But today, you can open that account. And that's what I think your message is always like, what is the equivalent of opening the account? What is the equivalent of picking up your foot?
Yeah, that's cool. So, right, what is the action you're taking today or this week? Realizing that, right, you're not going to be able to take some action every single day. And to do that would be setting up something unrealistic. But every week, every month, you can take many actions that make your life better. And I think, yeah, it's those 1% things, those very, very small things. So, okay. Well, Ginger, you've made me feel a little bit better here.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
But I love the it takes a village concept.
Yes, you said something about that in the episode where you said that this is no longer in fashion to say, or there's something like that people criticize about it takes a village. And I wondered what you meant by that because I just thought, oh my gosh, so much of what we're doing in this community is about saying you're not alone. And of course, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, I hear you. And I obviously like to steer clear of politics as much as possible. I think someone in the political sphere who's popular for saying that is, let's say, vilified by many people. So I think that's where I was going with it, but trying to steer clear. But you are absolutely right that what we're doing is building a worldwide community, right? Like that's really the point of Choose FI at this point, right? So actually one of the things that I wanted to mention was our local groups. And we don't mention this that often on the podcast anymore because it's almost like, oh, people know about them. But there's so many new people to the community at this point. And if you go to choosefi.com/local, we have hundreds of Choose FI local groups all across the world. And you can join a community of like minded people, maybe for the first time ever. You can talk to and interact with and be friends with people who share the same values as you when it comes to money and your overall outlook on life. And I think that has been really just such a game changer for a lot of people, those local groups. I know we have these aren't related to us, but there's Camp FI. So Camp Fi, I think it's campfi.org. Stephen Boyer does an amazing job there. And I think the final, just thinking about the local easy ones to get to, there is the Economy Conference in Cincinnati. I think that's coming up in March of 24. And Diana Merriam, who's been on the show a number of times, just puts on the most remarkable event. I mean, it's the biggest FI gathering in the whole world. And I can't wait to go back to that. Actually, she gives our community a 10% discount. So there's a Choose FI coupon code. Just put that in at checkout. So, Ginger, these groups, these weekends, right? That's what Camp FI and Economy are. It makes you realize you're not alone, truly. And I think that's what Teresa realized, right? She had help from her church, from her family, from those multiple cousins who helped, from the government, from the food pantry at the church. And she said, they are, quote, a bridge to something better for me. And I think so many people feel either ashamed to ask for help or to lean on other people. Or again, many of these programs are unfortunately maligned and vilified. And they really can be a bridge for people. And I mean, Teresa is the perfect example. So imagine what she went through from being a young single mother of two kids to having $20,000 of debt. But then she kept taking action. She kept having all these people in her life who provided that bridge, who wanted to help her. And it just really warmed my heart. I mean, truly warmed my heart to see like a case study of how this is done right. And it was awesome.
Yeah. One thing that I thought might be interesting to discuss from that episode was her strategy for making a big decision where she was saying, okay, I did the pros and I did the cons, and then the cons really outweighed the pros, but I just did it anyway. And it made me think about the different models that we have for making decisions. And since this is a show about taking action, I thought maybe I could share one of those models that might be helpful for someone.
Oh, I would love that. And this hits on some of your professional expertise, right?
There it is. Yeah. And so it made me think of it because she was saying, oh, my list didn't really matter. Ultimately, I still made another decision. And it highlighted how pro con lists aren't really very helpful. So the problem with the pro con list is that what we usually do is we say, oh, okay, well, there's 3 things in the con and there's 5 in the pro. So I should do the pro, right? But of course, they're not weighted. And it doesn't take into account the emotional weight behind those things. And so ultimately, it becomes not a great tool for making a decision. So there are lots of other ways to make it. So I was just going to share one that I have found helpful and that I think some of my clients have found helpful. And this is one that comes from Elizabeth Stanley from a book called Widen the Window. And it's a book about how to increase your ability to handle distress. So anyone who might be interested in that. But she talks about, okay, there's this, you can do this visualization. And what you do is you think about your 2 things. So let's say I'm deciding whether to take job A or job B. So first I focus on job A and I imagine myself fully having made that decision. So I'm going to actually, in my imagination, picture being in my office at my new job. I'm going to notice the things that I would notice in that room and think about what was on my schedule. So as best you can, really visualizing what that feels like and noticing your energy when you're imagining it. So is it, oh, I'm feeling excited when I think about that, or I'm feeling a little bit of dread, or I'm feeling nervousness, but to notice whether it's an energy that's going towards or it's kind of a stalling energy. And then you do the same for B, right? Okay, if I was in B, here's what my office would look like, and here's what that would feel like. And then what's the energy? Is it going towards or is it sort of stalling? And it's something that I've used in my own life. It's never led me astray. You know, it's usually pretty clear. You don't have to do a lot of dissecting to say, oh, this one feels like there's energy to this decision and this one doesn't. And so it can be just a quick check. And again, you really want to do the visualization. So you want to take 5 or 10 minutes to do it, but something to give a try.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, there's definitely, I've heard something, this is obviously a much less impressive version, but if you can't decide between 2 options, it's like flip a coin, but in midair, you kind of know which way you actually want it to come up is what I've heard. Again, that's silly and anecdotal, but yeah, I've definitely, the key point is following your energy. And you can really feel that, especially when you lean into it.
Yeah. It's a way to take a step back from the intellectual and tune into what your emotions are telling you.
Yeah, that's very cool. I guess for me, the final thing on Teresa's episode was I absolutely loved how she's focusing on her daughters and how she said the quote, "My family story changes here." And she was just so emphatic about it. And she said that she opened a Roth IRA for each of her daughters and matched the amount they put in. And I forget the exact number, but one of her daughters had like a fantastic net worth. It was like 50 or 100,000, something crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're just rocking it. I mean, talk about remarkable to think where she was at their age and now in one generation that she's completely changed the story.
Mm-hmm. So Teresa's is a really inspiring story and a really emotional one to listen to. Let's transition now to talking about one that was really, I want to say the opposite, like it's so freaking smart and strategic. So let's transition now to talking about a conversation that was really strategic and can be helpful, I think, to people for different reasons. And that's the salary negotiation and early retirement by the financial mechanic. And I got to say, Brad, I realized how old I was after listening to this episode.
Okay.
Because one of my first thoughts was like, oh, her parents must be so proud of her. Because she's just so articulate and so smart, and she is just crushing it.
She is absolutely crushing it. And yeah, she's amazing. It's just a real treat to get to go back over this again, right? Because she was on originally in episode 211 and to have an update. I think one of truly the enduring legacies of this show, and really to me, one of the most surprising things is how much people have latched on to negotiation.
Hmm.
And I think it was way back when there was a guest, Mr. Refined by Fire. And he said his quote was, "Everything is negotiable." And then to have Tori Dunlap on, and then to have Financial Mechanic on multiple times, to really drill into our heads that, hey, look, this is uncomfortable. Our society has not been set up for us to learn how to negotiate in our lives. It feels uncomfortable. It feels weird. It feels like something we shouldn't do. It feels like something that's a little maybe combative if you
Hmm.
think about it, like just on the face of it. But it's none of those things when it's framed properly.
Yeah.
And I think, Ginger, to me, that's the coolest part, is like that win-win mentality. I think that was the game changer for me, that ultimately the employer wants happy employees. The employer wants continuity of employees in a perfect world, right? You can start negotiating ahead of time before you get the job. You can start negotiating and get on their radar 6 to 8 months before your next review. And how can we make this win-win? How can I help you? Hey, I've done all this research and this is how I want to add to the team. Or, hey, these are the conferences that I want to go. Something as silly as that was like an eye opener for me. Like, you would never think there this entire list of different things you can negotiate. Like, hey, I want to go to 2 conferences this year and report back to the entire team on all these new happenings in our industry.
Yeah. I think this is going to be one of those episodes that people come back to again and again at those important times in their life. And the reason is, one thing she talked about was really persuasive on was, okay, if you are uncomfortable for this 1 week during this negotiation, the outcome might be that you cut 8 years off of your working life, right? And of course, when you hear that, it's like, wow, this is really important. And it's so obvious that I need to do this, but it's leaving out what's actually stopping people from doing that. And it's not, gosh, math, like, oh, just they haven't thought about that. It's that there's fear there. And it's so scary to go into these conversations. And so I think the value of this episode is that she gave so many templates, so many great answers to those questions that are scary for us to go into. And so anything that's going to lessen your fear or your distress about having the conversation, So even things like the dreaded question of how much do you need in this position? Oh my gosh, no one wants to get asked that. What are your expectations, right? She gave these very clear, awesome answers. And so it's worth it just for those templates alone, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, just getting these reps in. And I think both by listening to an episode like this and arming yourself with this knowledge, but B, like she's saying, you can actually literally get the reps in by having some of these conversations, applying for other jobs, and just kind of inoculating yourself, if you will, against the fear. Because I think that really is the issue. And she said, I think there was a quote, it's, "What's the harm in asking? It's just that little bit of discomfort."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's it. But yet, that's enough to keep most of us away from doing it. It's just that little bit of discomfort. But then, like you said, there are all of these amazing little tips that she's talking about. Like, even just something like, quote, "I know we can agree on a fair salary." Like, that is so disarming.
Yeah.
You hear that. I know we can agree on a fair salary. Or something as simple as, do not be the first one to offer a salary number. You want them to anchor the negotiation. Okay, that's incredible too. Down to, she just literally asked for a sign-on bonus or a relocation bonus, and they threw in, quote unquote, threw in $10,000. I mean, Ginger,
Yeah.
$10,000 thrown in for one question.
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think maybe even a bigger takeaway for people who are in a position where they're like, okay, well, I'm not looking to negotiate for a new job, right? So does this have value for me? Was sort of the mindset around the idea of discomfort, and that, like you said, people can stop when they feel that little bit of discomfort, but we can instead develop a relationship with it. And to increase, going back to increasing our own ability to tolerate distress, right? We can say, okay, I'm in a relationship with this feeling, and feelings don't last forever. And so if I think about being in a relationship versus this is a signal that something is wrong, then that can compel us to take positive action.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. And yeah, it's funny. I'm just going through. We could go through every single one of these like very precise details, but obviously that's not exactly what a roundup's for. But just this one, I couldn't pass up, was the 3 Ws, right? And you kind of alluded to this before, the wish number, the want number, and the walk number,
Mm.
right? So this might help you when you finally do have to throw out a number, or if it comes to that, okay, the wish is that dream, the want is what's absolutely necessary, and the walk is, hey, there's no chance whatsoever here. So just something like that, 3 W's. Okay, have those numbers, right? That's what financial mechanics says, is you need to think about this. How many of us just go into a job interview with no information? I mean, I got to be honest. I did some soul searching after an episode like this, and I'm like, man, I did none of this. I did all of the cardinals. Like I was thinking back to even when I was 22 and I was applying for like my first accounting job, or it must have been 21, and even just down to like when they ask you, do you have any questions? And I mean, there were job interviews where I had no questions.
Mhm.
It was as if I didn't care. I wasn't prepared. It was just a lack of preparation. And obviously, that's outside the scope of precisely what she's talking about here. But there are just so many easy ways to get ahead. And it's just by being armed with this information, right? And it's so many people, they just don't show up. I think I've jokingly said you can get ahead of 90% of people just by showing up to work, being there on time, and essentially like doing your work on time. As silly as that. And then like you get into the top 1% if you're actually proactively solving problems for people, trying to make people's lives easier. But even just the table stakes, what you would think are, hey, this is just table stakes for being alive in a job. I got to say, in my experience, I've seen that put you ahead of 9 out of 10 people, which again, is a little hyperbolic, but I don't think it's that far off. I really don't.
Okay, so let's move on to the final episode, which was creating your entrepreneurial flywheel with Nathan Barry.
Yeah, this is a fun one. I really enjoyed this episode. I know obviously not every episode is perfectly applicable to every single person in the audience, and there's some people who aren't entrepreneurs, but there are many, many people in the audience, in the community, who are entrepreneurs or who might be someday. And I think this episode really gave an overview on a lot of just the thought processes that Nathan approaches life and business with. And I think he's been just incredibly successful, obviously, both with ConvertKit, but with his other entrepreneurial ventures as well. And yeah, I mean, even Ginger, something as simple as like his 4 keys to quote simple success in creating. And this sounded a whole lot like the talent stack that we've talked about
Mhm.
for a long time, which is, hey, you don't need to be the world class expert on something. He said a skill you're at least in the 80th percentile in. 80th percentile is not that impressive in the cosmic scheme of things, but that's enough, obviously, to put you ahead of 4 out of 5 people.
Mhm.
And I think then the second part of a unique perspective. And I know I highlighted this in the episode, but I think it's important, which is something like my website Travel Miles 101, which was, hey, we are not the world-class experts on travel rewards. We just aren't. We're really good, but we are not these like hotshot kids flying in Singapore suites and in first class around the world. We're just normal family guys. It was me and my partner on that, Alexi, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, actually, that unique perspective is really broadly applicable. It's not so unique, actually, right? It's like how many millions of people are there out there that are just families that maybe in my case, it's obviously this is not again applicable for everyone, but in our case, hey, we're a family of 4. We have finite amounts of vacation time, and we'd like to take vacations for close to free using rewards points. And I think that unique perspective was something that really launched us and made us just so different from everybody else. And like he said, that sharing of your journey and then teaching everything that you know about it,
Oh, I love that.
right?
I know, and then I think you were the one who had said that this is the golden age of skill building, and I
Mm,
thought, "Oh, that would just, like, got me fired up," and especially with him saying, "Oh, the story of a person, we're so much more compelled to follow along." You talk about the success of your site, it made me think, "Okay, well, I also have a site that I post to very irregularly. I don't see as being a thing that will ever make me money. Maybe instead I need to go on the journey to build my skills and figure out how people do it."
I love that. That would be great. And right, it may not ever make money. It may. But if that's not the prerequisite for success in your eyes, then there's no downside to doing it, right? Because at the end of the day, you might learn dozens of unique skills that will help you undoubtedly in the future in some aspect of your life, right? There's no downside to that. We think about how much do we spend on college? and this is not like a vilified college thing, but you're spending 30, 40, $50,000 a year on college.
Yeah.
And what are you trying to do? You're trying to learn, essentially. If you can learn for free on YouTube and a couple Google searches, I mean, there's literally no downside to that other than your time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing that got me excited about it was this idea of how teaching can be integrated into that and how we want to go alongside someone who's sort of taking that journey because maybe we want to as well. Right. And so, yes, of course, I could go figure out how to do these things, but maybe there's some value in starting at zero and saying, hey, guys, who wants to watch me do this?
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see you do that. Like, that would
Oh,
be.
okay, great.
I'm not asking you to publicly proclaim it right now that you're going to do it, but it's something to really think about, right? I mean, I suspect there are lots of people listening to this right now who would love to follow along with your journey.
Yeah. Do you guys want to see me learn how to make $100 from my website? Write in and tell us.
That's cool. Yeah. So we got feedback at chooseavi.com, or obviously the easiest way is just get on my newsletter. So chooseavi.com/subscribe, and then just literally hit reply to the Tuesday email. Yeah, let me know, and we'll we'll try to convince Ginger to actually do this. That'd be cool.
There you go. Your mention of the newsletter made me think of, okay, my main takeaway or the thing that was the most exciting to me about that episode, you actually mentioned the next day in the newsletter. So maybe we don't need to talk about it too much. But I wanted to encourage everyone, if you started listening to the show or you're thinking, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur, so this isn't for me. If you get to the end, there's this incredible story of ways that he is helping his family, and it will inspire you. You will love it. So you at least have to get to that part of the episode. And in the newsletter, Brad actually, I think you gave like a timestamp.
Yeah, it was right at the 60-minute mark of that episode 455.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ginger, I think we've done 615 episodes, give or take. And that's got to be one of the highlights of, 600 plus hours of audio. It was extraordinary, right? And I mean, the question is, what can you do with the money? How would a windfall change your life? A lot of us just think so selfishly, right? And we all wonder, we think about it, but Nathan actually lived this, and he truly changed lives. And it was just, I mean, what an amazing story. We won't give away the punchline here. Just please go back, if you haven't listened to that episode, download it, and I don't care, just skip right ahead to minute 60. It's about a 5 to 10 minute segment, and it is remarkable.
Yeah. And I think, you said we usually think about it selfishly, and I think that's true, but I think also we think rather narrowly about what our money can do for us. And so actually having someone say, oh, here's this other thing to think about can really be eye-opening.
Yeah, that's a better word. Narrowly. I think that's better than what I meant by selfishly, actually. So thank you for clarifying. Because I think right. We just think about, hey, how can this impact me? What could I buy with this? How could this impact me? What can I do with my time? As opposed to, hey, there might be a way to really change lives of the most important people in your life. And I mean, obviously, again, that's probably not going to be a situation that most of us find ourselves in, the exact analog of what Nathan had, but it is something to think about because again, we went through the gift tax and how much you can give tax free per year, which is another neat thing. So there was a lot there.
Yeah, the gift tax part was interesting to me. I learned some stuff about that, and I'm still a little bit confused, honestly. You can give, is it, I don't remember the number, like $12,000 a year or something?
Yeah, it's 17.
Okay, 17,000. Is it true then that you can give that 17,000 to as many people as you want? It's about the individual that it maxes out at?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
that's exactly right. So this is an interesting thing. So just real quick. So gifts, and this is in very broad terms, in 99% of cases, or probably more than that, but I don't know every specific instance. But gifts are not taxable to the recipient. Okay, so that's the important thing. The only person who would ever pay tax on a gift is the person giving the gift. Okay.
Okay.
But for most of us, we have this, I think it's about $12 million, which is the lifetime, I think exemption is the word currently. So you might hear the word thrown around like the death tax or estate tax or something like that. It's all kind of part and parcel of that same roughly $12 million. So you can basically give gifts totaling that amount in your lifetime. And then obviously, if it went over that, then the gift tax or estate tax would apply against it. So now that's not going to be all that applicable to most people. But where the cool thing is, and what we were talking about in the episode, is there is an annual exclusion. Okay. And basically, what that means is if you're under that annual exclusion, it doesn't start counting against that $12 million. Okay. So think about that 12 million as like a running tally.
Mhm.
If this exclusion didn't exist and you gave a $10,000 gift, your running tally would then be at $11,990,000. Okay. And then you give another gift and it would keep reducing from there. But the nice thing is, as long as you are under that annual exclusion, it doesn't count against that overall amount.
Gotcha.
And now, again, many people are going to say, oh, I'm not going to have $12 million. Does this really matter? Yeah, I mean, listen, it probably doesn't. But there are many people, with the way we have so many prodigious savers in our community, that might come into effect. And also, that $12 million is not a sacrosanct number. That can change, that can be rewritten and certainly lowered significantly. So, Ginger, just to kind of bring this home. So let's just make it very simple. Let's say my wife, Laura, and I wanted to give gifts to my parents in this case. So similar to what Nathan did. So in 2023, I personally, Brad, could give $17,000 to my mom. I could give $17,000 to my dad. And Laura could give $17,000 to my mom and $17,000 to my dad. Okay. So because again, it's from person to person in that case. So that would be $68,000. And that would, each of those gifts would be under that exclusion amount and therefore would not count against that running tally of the 12 million, nor would you be required to file a gift tax return or anything like that. So that's the play here. And again, is this applicable to everybody? No, it's obviously not, but it's really important to know, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that was really cool that happened in the episode is that you were sort of challenged, although you kind of challenged yourself to take action right away. And so you brought in the ideas of the reviews and why you had stopped doing that, which was not really a great reason in your estimation.
That was a terrible reason.
Yeah, it was your estimation. And so in the episode, you said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this change now. So now is the time, right? Let's follow up on that.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this was a challenge to myself, but right, it's about these flywheels, and we haven't really talked about that, but Nathan talks about these creator flywheels, and basically, it's like he said, it's getting it to move that first time, that first rotation of the flywheel is so hard, but then it gets easier and easier, and it just kind of all feeds on itself. And I don't think of Choosify as like a business per se, but I'd be naive to not want to grow it, right? And I think for a long time I've just been kind of blasé about it. But we had a lot of these things that worked exceptionally well. And like I said, I did kind of go away from reading reviews on the podcast. And I also haven't been as overt, though I've been more overt about it lately, of asking people to get on the newsletter. That newsletter is really important. So it's, I put a lot of time and effort in that. And I really, if you're hearing this and you're not on this newsletter, chooseupi.com/subscribe. So please do that. And what this flywheel is, like he said, there's no start or stop to the momentum. It just kind of rolls into the next, and each rotation gets easier with time, and each rotation produces more, which is just kind of a cool framework, I think, for creating really anything, but creating content online, certainly. So anyway, the very long story short is asking for reviews from you, the community, is something that actually helps us get ranked higher in the podcasting world, and also you subscribing. So if you're just kind of downloading this one by one, just hit subscribe on whatever platform you're on, but also leave a review. We set up instructions at choosify.com/review. And I'm going to read one. This came in from NP Trader a couple of weeks ago, and it's the podcast that turned my road trip into a financial awakening. Right? How cool is
Awesome.
that? Financial awakening. Last Thanksgiving, your podcast became my road trip companion, guiding me from North Carolina to Disney World and back. By the time I returned, I devised a comprehensive strategy to transform my financial life. Fast forward 9 months, and I'm thrilled to report the plan has been a resounding success. I boosted my annual savings rate from about 5 to 10% to an astonishing 50%. I've switched to low-cost investment options for my retirement fund, and I'm successfully navigating the art of travel rewards, saving over $10,000 on flights to Europe and India, as well as over $1,000 in hotel stays in Europe. What impresses me most is the reliability of the advice you offer. It's not just theoretical. It has practical applications that have had a transformative impact on my family's life. This podcast and its vibrant community have my heartfelt gratitude. To anyone looking to make real changes in their financial planning, this podcast is a must listen. That's a heck of a review. So thank you for writing that in. And yeah, to everybody out there, send a review in. I'd love to read it on the podcast. I'm going to try to do that every single episode. So get on the newsletter, hit reply, and send me a review, just a screenshot of it. And I'd love to read it. So that's I always talk about taking action for the community. That's my action, is I really want to implement this, and I'd love your support and help. Awesome. Well, Ginger, I think that about rounds up the roundup here. So good to see you. Thanks for coming back on. And so you mentioned before you have a website. Let's tell everybody about it.
Yeah. So go to my website, fiisfun.com, so you can see the before it takes off after I do this challenge and make it into something special.
Nice. I love it. fiisfun.com. That's great. All right, Ginger, until next time.